The US President-elect has complained that his transition team are still facing what he called irresponsible obstruction from the political leadership at the Department of Defense. Joe Biden said his staff were not getting adequate information or briefings on key national security matters. A prominent Saudi human rights activist who campaigned for women to be allowed to drive has been sentenced to almost 6 years in jail on charges of spying and conspiracy. The UN Human Rights Office has called the sentencing of Lujain al-Hadhlul deeply troubling. In the UK, the daily number of confirmed coronavirus cases has passed 40,000 for the first time since the outbreak of the pandemic. There were 41,385 new cases, 357 deaths in the past 24 hours, all that further increasing pressure on hospitals.
The UK and the European Union today reached an agreement on their future relationship, ending the worst fears of economic disruption. At the end of the year, Britain will formally exit from both the EU's single market and customs union. Under the terms of the accord, both sides will continue to trade free of tariffs, but there will be significant new bureaucracy for importers and exporters. The free flow of workers will end and trade in services will be much reduced. And London's vast financial centre will no longer have guaranteed access to European markets. The agreement must be formally ratified by the European and UK parliaments and signed off by EU leaders before the end of the year. In the U.S., the coronavirus aid package passed by Congress earlier in the week remains in limbo after President Trump objected to the deal. House Republicans today blocked Democrats' attempt to pass legislation approving $2,000 stimulus checks for Americans after Trump demanded that Congress increase payments. The GOP countered with an attempt to cut foreign aid that was thwarted by Democrats in turn. People familiar with the matter say the president's allies are trying to convince him not to veto the aid package. Lawmakers have a small window to reach a compromise on the legislation before government funding runs out at 12:01 a.m. Tuesday. Meantime, the U.S. reported more than 228,000 new COVID cases Wednesday, up from more than 195,000 a day earlier, according to Johns Hopkins University. The U.S. also recorded 3,359 coronavirus deaths, down slightly from a day earlier.
We begin with breaking news. A new variant of COVID-19 that was first identified in South Africa has reached Japan. Health Ministry officials say a Japanese woman in her 30s traveled back from the African nation on December 19th. She tested positive at Narita Airport near Tokyo. Now that comes as government officials have been tightening border controls to stop the spread of such new strains. They've suspended the entry of non-resident foreign nationals for 1 month. The measure is in effect from Monday and will continue through January 31st. A similar restriction is already in effect for travelers from the United Kingdom and South Africa. All travelers returning to or entering Japan from places where the variants have been confirmed need to submit a negative test certificate. Travelers need to take a test within 72 hours before departure and another upon arrival in Japan. The government says it will continue to allow people to travel for business to and from 10 designated countries and Taiwan.
I often go to foreign countries for business, but now I'm worried about whether I will be able to come back to Japan.
I try not to touch anything, even the tray table on the airplane, and I won't take off my face mask.
The government is also suspending a conditional exemption of a 14-day self-quarantine for Japanese and foreign residents when they re-enter Japan after a short overseas business trip. Meanwhile, officials reported 2,000 new cases across Japan on Monday as the pandemic continues to spread. In Tokyo, authorities confirmed 481 new infections, the highest ever figure for a Monday. 81 patients are in serious condition. Hospital beds are filling, especially in big cities. Occupancy rates stand at nearly 65% in Tokyo and more than 70% in Osaka. A government task force met Monday evening to discuss the situation. Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide told ministers there should be no let-up in their fight against the pandemic.
There are no holidays for the virus. Ministers should feel a sense of urgency more than ever before. Take thorough measures toward and during the year end. We should encourage people to work together to bring back normality soon.
Suga urged the public to stick with basic precautions such as washing their hands and wearing masks. The government halted a domestic travel promotion program on Monday until January 11th. Kiyomizu Temple in Kyoto is usually bustling with tourists at this time of year, but the crowds were staying away. A total of more than 224,000 people have tested positive in Japan. Over 3,300 have died. Staying with Japan to the severe winter weather hitting parts of the country. The meteorological agency is forecasting heavy snow across wide areas over the New Year holidays. A powerful winter pressure pattern is expected to bring heavy snow, mainly to regions along the Sea of Japan coast between Wednesday and Saturday. Snow is also forecast for flat areas along the Pacific coast. The agency is calling on people to finish preparing for the frigid conditions by Tuesday. They should not go out unless it's essential.
People need to prepare snow tires or chains for their cars. Please be aware of snow falling from roofs. Heavy snow might also cause power outages and trees to fall down.
Earlier this month, a strong cold air mass brought record snowfall to elevated parts of Niigata and neighboring Gunma prefectures. Blizzards trapped more than 2,000 vehicles for many hours on an expressway. Media outlets in Hong Kong report 30 pro-democracy activists and other people based abroad have been placed on a wanted list for allegedly violating the national security law China imposed on the territory. Hong Kong media, as well as China's state-run Central Television, say Hong Kong police are searching for individuals now living in Britain, the United States, and other countries. They face accusations of inciting secession and colluding with foreign forces to endanger national security. The wanted list includes former pro-democracy lawmaker Ted Hui, who has been charged with disrupting proceedings at the Legislative Council. Hui traveled to Europe after he was released on bail and announced earlier this month he was going into exile. Nathan Law is also on the list. He's a prominent pro-democracy activist who's relocated to Britain. Pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong have been severely restricted since the national security law was enacted in June. Authorities are also intensifying their crackdown on activities outside Hong Kong, as the law stipulates acts committed abroad and foreigners can also be prosecuted. The European Union and the United Kingdom have agreed on a grace period before placing full tariffs on hybrid and electric vehicles made with parts from outside the area. A free trade deal struck between the two on Thursday aims for zero tariffs on goods traded between Britain and the EU from January 1st. But sufficient local content is needed to qualify. Levies are imposed on cars if more than 45% of their parts are sourced from outside. The EU and UK agreed on a 6-year phased-in approach for autos seen as eco-friendly. Vehicles with a ratio of up to 60% of outside parts will be tariff-free until 2023. That'll be reduced to 55% from 2024 to 2026 and revert to 45% in 2027. The timeline may impact Japanese automakers such as Toyota and Nissan. They assemble hybrid and electric vehicles overseas using major components imported from Japan. This means the companies will need to raise their local content to avoid future tariffs. More to come here on NHK Newsline, so don't go away. And before we wrap up, the Japanese animation film Demon Slayer has shattered the country's all-time box office record. It earned more than 32.4 billion yen, about $310 million in just over 2 months. The previous record was 31.6 billion yen for the 2001 animation fantasy Spirited Away, directed by Miyazaki Hayao. The distributor of Demon Slayer, Toho, says more than 24 million people have seen the film in theaters since it was released on October 16th. The film is based on a hit manga series about a boy who fights demons in Japan about a century ago. It's a sequel to a TV animation series aired last year. And experts said the appeal of Demon Slayer may be partly attributed to people's sensibilities during the coronavirus pandemic.
正義が貫かれる
The film is about justice prevailing. It has a positive message at a time when many of us are feeling depressed. I think that's why the movie has gained such wide acceptance.
He added, while the film stayed true to the original story, it also brought in some new elements that appealed to fans and moviegoers alike.
Massive pandemic relief package. President Trump signing the bill overnight, averting a government shutdown. This after refusing to sign it for nearly a week. ABC's Rachel Scott has the latest from Washington for us. Rachel, good morning.
Wick, good morning. The whiplash kept Americans on edge for days, but after throwing relief for millions into jeopardy, the president finally relenting and signing that rescue package he called a disgrace. Overnight, President Trump changing course again, finally signing the $2.3 trillion spending and stimulus relief bill with just 24 hours to go until a government shutdown. The president's reversal came after he held on to the bill for nearly a week, letting unemployment benefits run dry for millions, while for days he blasted the deal his own team helped negotiate.
It really is a disgrace.
But under pressure from lawmakers, he suddenly decided to move forward, getting relief into the hands of Americans like Amanda Drennan, who lost her job of 16 years back in March.
I worry and I care about myself and my family. We need COVID relief so bad.
The package includes $600 checks for Americans who earn less than $75,000 a year, plus enhanced unemployment benefits and funding for small businesses and vaccine distribution. In a statement, the president still insisting he wants more money going to the American people in the form of $2,000 checks per adult. Democrats in the House are expected to rally behind a measure today to boost those direct payments.
The American people want $2,000. They need it, given the economic crisis.
But that likely won't stand a chance for Republicans in the Senate. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell making no such commitment in his statement overnight, saying only the president's leadership has prevented a government shutdown at a time when our nation could not have afforded one. And despite the president's demands, he failed to get a single thing changed in that bill. Democrats are blasting him for the delay, saying it will have consequences for millions of Americans out of work, warning that there now will be a weeks-long delay before those unemployment benefits are started back up again. And on top of that, it's just still unclear how soon those stimulus checks will get to the American people. TJ?
All right, Rachel, thank you so much. I'm going to turn now to really an incredible scene in Nashville. Developments now in that Christmas Day bombing there. Investigators naming a suspect overnight and confirming that the man died in that blast. Now, this morning, the officers who rushed to the scene to save lives are speaking out and emotionally speaking out as well. Our Marcus Moore is there in Nashville with the very latest. Marcus, good morning to you.
TJ, good morning. We are just outside the blast zone here in Nashville. This is the closest we've been able to get all weekend. And I want you to take a look at our second camera, and you will see that building in the distance there. There are apartments and businesses in that second street, and you can see the fire alarms are still going off. The windows have been blown out. And look at all of that debris covering the ground. It's evidence of a massive explosion that shook the Music City. Overnight, federal agents naming a suspect in that investigation into the powerful explosion that rocked Nashville early Christmas morning.
Anthony Warner is the man believed to be responsible for this horrible crime.
Surveillance cameras trained on the popular downtown area captured from multiple angles this RV exploding. Police releasing this video showing a vicious fireball lighting up the sky, hurling debris across several blocks.
He was present when the bomb went off, and that he perished in the bombing.
Investigators also looking into Warner's psychiatric and medical history for clues and trying to determine whether the AT&T building where the RV was parked was his intended target. Multiple law enforcement sources told ABC News investigators are seriously exploring whether Warner may have been motivated, at least in part, by a paranoia over 5G cellular technology. At a home associated with Warner seen in this video, exclusively obtained by ABC News, agents can be seen carrying out bags of evidence, and nearby, more officers in tactical gear. ABC News has learned through court records that Warner, who once owned and lived at the home being searched, recently transferred the deed to a woman in California. What connection that may have to the explosion is under investigation. Meanwhile, 6 Metro Nashville police officers hailed as heroes